Can you imagine what it's like to raise a child with all the love in the world, dedicating every second of your life to watching them grow strong and healthy, only to, decades later, feel their fists against your face? I never thought I'd experience this. In that terrible moment, as blood ran down my chin and my vision blurred with tears, I looked at his wife, my daughter-in-law, and saw something that froze my heart. She was smiling. It wasn't a small smile of discomfort. It was a smile of satisfaction, of victory, as if she were finally witnessing something she'd always wanted to see. In that instant, something inside me shattered irreparably. It wasn't just my dignity that was shattered in that room. It was the image I had of the family I'd built. But do you know what they didn't expect? That this wounded, humiliated, and bloodied mother still had the strength to make a decision that would completely change the course of their lives. As they left for work that morning, expecting everything to continue as usual, I set in motion a plan that would leave them utterly desperate. When they returned that afternoon, they found something they never imagined. Before I continue, I need your support. If you're enjoying this narrative and want me to continue producing true and impactful content like this, please subscribe to the channel now. Click the subscribe button and don't forget to activate the bell by selecting the All option to receive notifications whenever I post a new story. Your subscription is essential for the growth of this work and motivates me immensely to continue sharing real experiences. Also, share this narrative with your friends and family. Stories like this need to be heard and discussed. Stay until the end, because the outcome will completely surprise you. And tell me in the comments, which country and city are you listening from right now? My name is Jasmine, and what I'm about to tell you happened just a few months ago, but it feels like yesterday. The pain is still fresh in my memory, as are the scars I carry, some visible, others forever etched in my soul. It all began on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. The sun streamed through the living room windows, creating golden patterns on the hardwood floor. I was preparing dinner, something I always did with love, when I heard the door open. It was my son, Marcus, accompanied by his wife, Vivian. Since Marcus married her 3 years ago, I've noticed subtle changes in his behavior. The affectionate son who hugged tightly began to distance himself. The guy who called me every day began responding to messages with monosyllables. Vivian was always polite to me, but there was something in her eyes, a calculated coldness that made me uncomfortable. That particular afternoon, they arrived with grim expressions. Marcus carried a folder of documents under his arm, while Vivian walked behind him with that air of superiority that irritated me deeply. "Mom, we need to talk," Marcus said, without even greeting me. I dried my hands on my apron and turned to face them. "Of course, son." "About what?" He threw the briefcase onto the kitchen table with unnecessary force. The sound echoed through the room, shattering the tranquility of the afternoon. "About the apartment," he replied, with a harshness in his voice that he had never directed at me. The apartment. That damned apartment that had become the source of so much conflict in recent months. When Marcus and Vivian got married, I offered them an apartment I owned downtown. It was an excellent property in a prime location that I'd bought years earlier as an investment. I put it in their names to live in, but kept the property registered in my name as a precaution, something my lawyer had suggested, and at that moment, I was immensely grateful for having followed his advice. "What about the apartment?" I asked, pretending not to understand where this was leading. Vivian stepped forward, crossing her arms over her chest. "Then, Jasmine, we've talked about this several times. We need you to transfer the property into our name. We've lived there for 3 years, renovated it, and invested money. It's only fair that the property is officially ours." The way she said my name, without the ma'am or any other title of respect, already demonstrated her lack of consideration. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. "Vivian, as I explained before, the apartment is an asset I intend to preserve. You live there rent-free, bill-free, and worry-free. I don't understand the problem with keeping things as they are. Marcus slammed his hand on the table, making the salt shakers jump. The problem is we have no security. At any moment you could decide to take us out of there. We need stability to plan our future. Marcus, I would never do this without reason. You are my son. Everything I have will eventually be yours, but as long as I'm alive, I want to maintain control over my assets. Is that so hard to understand? Vivian let out a sarcastic laugh that made me clench my fists. Control. It's always about control with you, isn't it? You can't stand the idea of your son growing up, getting married, having his own life. You want to keep him on a leash, dependent, controlled. I felt the blood rush to my face. That woman was completely distorting the situation, putting words in my mouth, feelings in my heart that simply weren't there. Be careful what you say, Vivian. You don't know me well enough to make such accusations. I know you perfectly well, she retorted, approaching with firm steps. You're one of those toxic mothers who can't let go of their children. A manipulator who uses money and property to keep people close. Enough, I shouted, finally losing my patience. I won't tolerate you coming into my house and disrespecting me like that. If you're not happy with your current arrangement, you can find somewhere else to live. It was at that moment that everything fell apart. Marcus advanced toward me with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. His eyes were wild, his jaw clenched, the veins on his neck bulging. He wasn't my son anymore in that moment. He was a stranger filled with rage. "You will not speak to my wife like that," he roared. Before I could react or retreat, I felt the first blow. His clenched fist collided with my face with brutal force, striking my left cheek. The pain was instantaneous and shocking, radiating across my entire face. I staggered back, clutching the impact site, but Marcus didn't stop. The second punch came right after, slamming into my mouth. I tasted the metallic taste of blood flooding my tongue, my lower lip tearing against my teeth. My legs buckled, and I fell to my knees on the cold kitchen floor, stunned, unable to process that this was actually happening. "Marcus," I managed to mutter, my voice cracking. "Son, what are you doing?" But he didn't seem to hear me. He grabbed my hair, pulling hard, ripping strands from between his fingers. Tears stingingly ran down my bruised face as I tried to protect my head with my arms. 3 years, he shouted, completely out of his mind. 3 years living in that place as if we were your servants, as if we owed eternal favor for something that should be ours by right. Another blow, this time to the right side of my face, making my head spin violently to the side. I saw stars dancing in my blurry vision. Blood was now running from my nose, dripping onto the floor, creating small red puddles on the light tile. And then, through the haze of pain and confusion, I heard something that made it all the more disturbing. Laughter. Vivian leaned against the kitchen doorframe, her arms still crossed, watching the violent scene unfold with a wide smile on her face. It wasn't a nervous or uncomfortable smile. It was genuine satisfaction. Her eyes shone with perverse pleasure as she watched my son beat me. Our eyes locked for a second that felt like an eternity. In that brief moment of visual connection, I understood everything. This wasn't Marcus's outburst of uncontrolled rage. It was something that had been nurtured, cultivated, encouraged. Vivian had planted seeds of resentment in my son's heart, watered them with poisonous words, nurtured them with lies and distortions until they blossomed into this horrific violence. She wanted that. She wanted to see me broken, humiliated, destroyed. Marcus finally stopped, panting, standing over me as I lay curled up on the ground. My face was on fire, every inch throbbing with excruciating pain. I knew I was badly hurt. I could feel the swelling rapidly forming, closing my left eye. "You're going to sign the transfer," he said, his voice still thick with anger, but more controlled now. "No matter what it takes, you're going to give us that apartment." I spat blood onto the floor before answering, each word stinging as it passed through my wounded lips. Never. Vivian then came closer, crouching down beside me. Her expensive perfume made me sick as she leaned close to my ear. "You're pathetic," she whispered, just for me to hear. An old woman, alone, trying to cling to the only power she still has. But this will end. One way or another, that apartment will be ours. She stood up, smoothing her skirt as if nothing had happened, and placed her hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Come on, honey. We're late for dinner with my parents. Let your mom think about her choices." And just like that, they simply left. The door closed behind them with a soft click, leaving me alone on the kitchen floor, bloodied, bruised, broken. I stood there for an indeterminate amount of time. It could have been minutes or hours. I completely lost track of time as I processed what had just happened. My son, the person I carried, the one I fed, the one I taught to walk and talk, had brutally assaulted me. And his wife had enjoyed it. Eventually, I managed to drag myself to the bathroom. The reflection in the mirror was shocking. My face was unrecognizable, swollen, purple, bloody. My left eye had already closed completely. My lip was 3 times its normal size, split in half. There was a deep cut on my eyebrow that would require stitches. I washed the blood away gently, each touch of the damp towel triggering new waves of agony. The tears returned, silent now, streaming down my bruised cheeks. They weren't just tears of physical pain, they were sadness, betrayal, mourning for the mother-son bond that had disintegrated so violently. But along with the sadness, something else began to grow inside me. A cold, unshakable determination, a clarity about what needed to be done. If Marcus and Vivian wanted to play dirty, then I would too, but I would play to win. That night, I could barely sleep. Every position in bed put pressure on some injured part of my face. I took strong painkillers, but the pain persisted, throbbing and constant. However, my mind worked tirelessly, elaborating, planning, calculating every move. When the sun rose the next morning, I knew exactly what to do. I waited until 8:30 when I knew both Marcus and Vivian would be at work. He was a manager at a tech company. She worked as a coordinator at an advertising agency. They both had predictable routines, leaving home around 7:30 every morning. I called my lawyer, Daniel Thornton, a competent man who had handled my legal matters for over 15 years. "Daniel, I need to sell the apartment at 742 Westwood Street," I said as soon as he answered, my voice distorted through my swollen lips. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Jasmine? Your face? Are you okay? Your voice sounds strange." "I have a dental problem," I lied, not wanting to go into details at that moment. "Can we arrange the sale immediately?" "Isn't that the apartment where your son lives?" "Exactly, and it's registered in my name, correct?" "Yes, it is. But Jasmine, this could create serious family complications. Are you sure?" "Daniel," I interrupted, keeping my tone firm despite the difficulty in articulating the words. "How many years have you known me?" 15, approximately. "And in all these years, have I ever asked for something without being absolutely sure?" He sighed. "No, never." "Okay, I'll start the process, but you'll need to move quickly if you want it to be completed before they find out and try to legally stop it. How much time do we need? If we find a buyer willing to close immediately and offer a slightly below market price, we might be able to do it in 5 days. But it's risky. Do it in 3. Daniel hesitated again, but he knew my determination well enough not to argue. "I'll see what I can do. I need you to come to the office to sign some documents today." "I'll be there in an hour." I hung up and looked in the mirror again. The swelling had worsened overnight. I'd need heavy makeup to even remotely conceal the damage, but it would still be obvious that something terrible had happened. I didn't care. Let them see, let them know. In Daniel's office, the receptionist couldn't hide her shock upon seeing me. Her eyes widened, her mouth dropped open, but she quickly regained her professional expression. "Miss Jasmine, Dr. Thornton is waiting for you. Please follow this way." Daniel stood up as soon as I entered his room, concern evident on his face. "Oh my God, Jasmine, what happened? That wasn't a dental problem at all." I slowly sat down in the chair in front of his desk. It was my son. The silence that followed was heavy. Daniel sat back down, processing my words. "Did Marcus do this to you?" With his wife's enthusiastic approval. "Jasmine, this is assault. You should file a police report, get a restraining order." "No," I interrupted firmly. "I won't expose my son like that. But I will take other measures." Daniel laced his fingers together on the table, studying me with the shrewd gaze of a seasoned lawyer. "The sale of the apartment is part of these measures. It's just the beginning." We spent the next 2 hours reviewing documents, signing paperwork, and organizing the details of the sale. Daniel already had a few potential buyers on his list, investors who frequently sought properties in prime locations and were willing to close quickly for a fair price. "I've reached out to a businessman who's looking for properties in that exact area," Daniel said, typing rapidly on his laptop. "He invests in short-term rental properties. If we offer 10% below market value, I'm sure he'll close immediately." "Perfect. Make the proposal." While Daniel handled the calls and negotiations, I sat silently, watching out the office window. Below, the city throbbed with normal life. People hurried along the sidewalks, cars honked in the traffic, street vendors hawked wares. The world continued to spin, oblivious to the personal drama unfolding on that 12th floor. I thought of Marcus, not the violent man who had assaulted me yesterday, but the boy he had been. I remembered the day he learned to ride a bike, the way he had run into my arms after falling and scraping his knee, trusting me to make the pain go away. I remembered the nights he had nightmares and taken refuge in my bed, feeling safe only by my side. When had everything changed so much? The answer, I knew, lay in Vivian. She had burst into our lives like a smiling, charming, and articulate hurricane, completely captivating Marcus. At first, I tried to like her. I really did. But there was something predatory in her eyes, a boundless ambition that kept me on edge. Marcus was blind, too in love to see beyond the carefully constructed facade, and Vivian was skillful at driving a wedge between us, planting doubts, distorting innocent situations, gradually transforming me into the villain of a narrative she herself had written. "We have a deal," Daniel announced, pulling me from my thoughts. "The buyer accepts the price and wants to close in 48 hours. He'll transfer the deposit today." "Excellent." "Jasmine." Daniel leaned forward, his expression serious. "Do you understand that when Marcus finds out, there will be consequences? He could sue, claim she was coerced, question your mental capacity." "Let him try," I replied calmly. "The apartment is legally in my name. There's no document granting him any ownership rights. It was a loan for use, nothing more. I have every right to sell." "Legally, yes, but emotionally, morally..." "Daniel, you saw my face. Do you think I owe any emotional or moral consideration to someone who did this to me?" He looked down, recognizing the point. "No, I suppose not. Then let's proceed." The next 2 days were a surreal mix of persistent physical pain and meticulous preparation. My face slowly began to improve. The swelling subsided somewhat, though the bruises now displayed a grotesque rainbow of purples, greens, and yellows. I took regular painkillers and applied cold compresses, following the instructions I'd researched online, refusing to go to the hospital and create official records. Meanwhile, Daniel worked tirelessly processing the paperwork. The buyer, a businessman named Robert Chen, proved to be extremely cooperative and efficient. The money was transferred to my account within hours of the initial agreement. The paperwork was completed with impressive speed, considering typical real estate bureaucracy. During those days, Marcus called twice, I didn't answer either call. He also sent a few messages, which I read, but didn't respond to. Mom, we need to talk about the apartment. Don't be stubborn, be reasonable. Vivian and I are willing to negotiate. Call back. No apologies. No apologies for the violence. He didn't even ask how I was recovering from the injuries he'd inflicted. It was all about the damn apartment. On the morning of the third day, Daniel called me with the news I was waiting for. It's done. The deed was recorded 20 minutes ago. Robert Chen is now the legal owner of the apartment at 742 Westwood Street. I felt a wave of satisfaction run through me, mixed with nervousness about what would come next. What about their belongings? I asked. Chen agreed to give 48 hours to remove everything from the apartment. After that, anything remaining will be discarded or donated. He wants to completely renovate the space before putting it on the rental market. Perfect. When are you going to tell Marcus? I won't tell. He'll find out for himself when he gets home today. There was a significant pause on the other end of the line. Jasmine, this will be a huge shock. Good. Whatever. I hung up and spent the rest of the morning organizing my own house, keeping myself busy so I wouldn't obsess over what was about to happen. I cleaned out closets that didn't need cleaning, reorganized already perfectly organized drawers, and prepared an elaborate meal I knew I couldn't eat. The hours dragged by with agonizing slowness. Finally, around 5 o'clock, my phone started ringing. It was Marcus. I ignored it. It rang again. I ignored it again. The third time, I answered. "Hello," he said simply, keeping his voice neutral. "Mom, what did you do?" he yelled so loudly I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "There's a man here in the apartment saying he's the new owner. He says you sold the place." "I did," I replied calmly, savoring every word. "You can't do this. We live here. All our stuff is here. I can, and I did." The apartment was in my name. I had every right to sell it whenever I wanted. I heard confused voices in the background, Vivian hysterical, screaming something incomprehensible, and a calm male voice trying to explain the situation. "You're crazy," Marcus continued, his voice wavering between anger and despair. "Are you going to leave us on the street? We're your family." The word family ricocheted through my chest like a bullet. I took a deep breath before answering. Family doesn't beat. Family doesn't humiliate. Family doesn't smile while watching violence being committed. You destroyed any family bond when you decided to treat me like trash. It was a moment of anger. I didn't mean to. What didn't you want, Marcus? Didn't you want to punch me in the face? Didn't you want to make me bleed out on my own kitchen floor while your wife watched? Which part exactly didn't you want? Abrupt silence on the other end. I could hear him breathing heavily, probably realizing for the first time the full gravity of what he had done. "Mom, it was a mistake." A mistake is spilling coffee on your shirt. A mistake is forgetting a birthday. What you did was a deliberate choice to hurt me deeply, both physically and emotionally. And now you're going to deal with the consequences of that choice. Vivian snatched the phone from him at that moment, her high-pitched voice piercing my ear. "You're a vengeful witch. We'll sue you. We'll prove you were senile, that you were coerced. You'll never get away with this." "Try it," I replied, with a calmness that clearly infuriated her. "I have all the documents perfectly in order, signed by me in perfect mental health, witnessed by a reputable lawyer. Good luck proving anything." "Oh, and Vivian. Maybe I should have thought of that before I turned into your enemy." I hung up before she could respond and immediately blocked both of their numbers. My hands shook slightly as I placed the phone on the table. Part of me felt intense satisfaction that justice had been served. Another part, smaller but still present, felt sadness for the definitive breakup I had just completed. But I didn't regret it. Not for a single second did I regret it. In the following days, I learned from Daniel that Marcus and Vivian had tried to hire him to reverse the sale. He, of course, refused due to a conflict of interest. They consulted other lawyers, and they all came to the same conclusion. There was no legal basis for a dispute. The apartment was mine, the sale was legitimate, and they had no right to the property. I also learned from a mutual friend that they had to rush to a small, poorly located apartment on the outskirts of the city, all they could find given the urgency of the situation and their limited budget. Vivian was furious, posting vague messages on social media about family injustices and manipulative people who use money as a weapon. I let him speak. Words couldn't hurt me any more than I had already been hurt. About 2 weeks after the sale, I received a certified letter. It was from Marcus. I recognized the handwriting on the envelope and hesitated for a long time before opening it. When I finally did, I found 3 handwritten pages. The writing was hurried, uneven, unlike my son's normally careful writing. Mother, I don't expect you to read this. You've blocked our numbers. You're ignoring our attempts to contact you. And frankly, I can't blame you. But I need to at least try to put on paper what I couldn't say in person. There's no excuse for what I did. None. No matter how frustrated or angry I was, I should never have laid hands on you. I should never have allowed anger to control me like that. Seeing your face that day, seeing the blood, seeing the pain I caused, it haunts me every night. Vivian says you've manipulated me my whole life. She says the apartment was a tool of control. She says you never wanted me to be happy with another woman. And I believed her. I let those words poison my perception of you, of us, of our entire history together. But now, living in a tiny place where we barely fit, struggling financially to pay rent 3 times what we needed to spend, I realized something. You never asked for anything in return for that apartment. You never used it against us. You never threatened to take it away when we disagreed. You simply offered it because you wanted to help us. And I, reciprocated with violence. I'm not asking for forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it. I'm not asking to undo what was done because I understand it was a consequence of my own actions. I'm simply saying that I recognize the mistake, even if it's too late. I miss you. I miss our conversations, our Sunday lunches, the way you laughed at my bad jokes. I destroyed all of that with my own fists. If one day, perhaps a long time from now, I can find space in your heart to at least talk, I'd welcome that chance. But I'll respect it if the answer is no. Always your son, even if you don't deserve to be, Marcus. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't tears of weakness or regret. They were tears for all that had been lost, for the innocence destroyed, for the family that would never be the same again. I kept the letter in a drawer without replying. Maybe one day I would, or maybe not. I hadn't yet decided how much of myself I was willing to offer again to the one who had so brutally torn me apart. Another 2 months passed. My face healed completely, leaving no visible physical scars. The emotional ones were another story. I developed a new routine, reorganized my priorities, and started therapy to process the trauma. The therapist, a skilled woman named Dr. Helena Reeves, helped me immensely understand the toxic patterns that had developed in the relationship between Marcus, Vivian, and me. She explained emotional manipulation, how skilled people can distort perceptions and create false narratives that even victims begin to believe. What you did by selling the apartment was establish a firm boundary, Helena said during one of our sessions. Boundaries are essential, especially when dealing with people who consistently disregard our well-being. But was it cruel? I asked, still struggling with shreds of guilt. To leave them with nothing like that, all of a sudden? Jasmine, they physically assaulted you. The cruelty was theirs, not yours. You simply reacted by protecting your legitimate interests. The apartment was yours. You had every right to do what you did. He sent a letter asking, not exactly for forgiveness, but acknowledging his mistake. And how did that make you feel? I considered carefully before answering. Confused, relieved that he finally acknowledged what he did, but also cautious. Words are cheap, especially when one is facing consequences. Actions are what truly matter. Helena nodded approvingly. Exactly. You don't owe him anything. Not immediate forgiveness, not quick reconciliation, not anything. If and when you decide to open some space for communication, it will be on your own terms, in your own time. Those words brought peace. I allowed myself to simply exist without the pressure of making immediate decisions about Marcus. He would wait, indefinitely if necessary, while I healed. However, as the weeks progressed, fragmented information about their situation began to trickle in. An acquaintance who worked at the same company as Vivian casually mentioned during a social event that she had been demoted due to performance issues. Another friend saw Marcus at a cheap neighborhood supermarket, buying lower-end products, looking tired and worn out. Part of me, the part that was still a mother, no matter how much I tried to suppress it, felt a pang in my heart. But I quickly remembered. They created this situation, not me. They made conscious choices that led them to exactly where they were now. One day, about 4 months after the apartment was sold, I received an unexpected call. It was Vivian's number. I'd unblocked both of them weeks earlier, deciding that blocking them was giving them too much power over my emotional reactions. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the answer button. Finally, curiosity overcame caution. "Hello," he said, keeping his voice neutral. "Jasmine, it's me, Vivian." Her voice sounded completely different, small, broken, with none of her usual arrogance. "What do you want?" "I need to talk to you. In person." "Please." Why would I agree to that? Because I need to apologize, truly apologize. And there are things you need to know about me, about the whole situation. Things that explain, not justify, but explain why everything happened in that terrible way. I was tempted to immediately refuse and hang up. But there was something in his voice, a genuine vulnerability I hadn't noticed before. Against my better judgment, I agreed. "Tomorrow, 2 o'clock, at the Riverside Cafe. 30 minutes, no more." "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." The next afternoon, I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early, strategically choosing a table in the back where we'd have privacy but could still see the entrance. I ordered a coffee and waited. Vivian arrived punctually. It took me a second to recognize her. The impeccably dressed and perfectly made-up woman I'd met had disappeared. In her place was someone dressed simply, without makeup, with her hair unkempt in a messy ponytail. She looked like she'd aged years in just a few months. He sat awkwardly across from me, avoiding direct eye contact. "Thank you for coming," she began, her hands shaking slightly as she clasped them together on the table. "You have 30 minutes, I replied coldly. "Start talking." She took a deep breath, finally raising her eyes to meet mine. "I grew up in extreme poverty. My mother was an addict, my father was absent, and I had to help raise 5 younger siblings. I slept on shelter couches, ate in soup kitchens, and wore donated clothes my entire life. I swore as a teenager that I would escape this life, no matter the cost." I remained silent, letting her continue. "I met Marcus when I had already achieved some stability, a decent job, a tiny but clean apartment. But it wasn't enough. It never felt like enough because I carried this constant fear of returning to poverty, of losing everything and finding myself back in that horrible place of despair." She paused, swallowing hard. "When I discovered you had property, that you had assets, something inside me awakened. It wasn't love for Marcus that motivated me, although I did develop affection for him over time. It was security. It was the promise of never having to worry about having a place to sleep or something to eat again." "So you manipulated him," I stated, keeping my voice controlled. Yes, she admitted without hesitation. Systematically, deliberately, I planted doubts in you, distorted innocent situations, fueled non-existent resentments. I made you the villain so he would side with me, so that when I pushed for things like transferring the apartment, he would automatically support me. And that day, when he hit me, you smiled. Vivian closed her eyes, her face contorting in anguish. That was my darkest moment. I can't adequately explain what went through my mind. It was like I was finally seeing you, the person who represented all my fears and insecurities being taken down. It was power. It was control. It was sick and horrible. She's a psychopath, I stated bluntly. Maybe, she agreed calmly. Probably. But here's the thing. After you sold the apartment, after we found ourselves genuinely struggling, something broke inside me. Marcus was devastated, not just financially, but emotionally. He started questioning everything, including our relationship, and I realized what a monster I had become. I took a sip of coffee, processing his words. Why are you telling me this? Do you want me to feel sorry for you? Do I want my apartment back? No. She shook her head vigorously. I would never have the courage to ask you that. I'm telling you because you deserve to understand. And because I'm leaving Marcus. This statement caught me off guard. What? I'm going to file for divorce. He deserves someone genuine, someone who loves him for the right reasons. I can't be that person. I'm too corrupt, too damaged, and staying would only perpetuate the cycle of toxicity. We sat in silence for several moments. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction from this confession, from seeing the person who had done so much to destroy my family admit his guilt. But all I felt was exhaustion. Vivian, he finally said, I appreciate the honesty, even if it's late, but it doesn't change anything. You and Marcus hurt me in ways that may never fully heal. Your story explains context, but it doesn't provide an excuse. I know, she whispered. I'm not seeking absolution. I just wanted you to know the truth before you disappear from Marcus's life, and by extension, yours. She got up to leave, but paused, looking at me one last time. For what it's worth, I'm sorry, truly, deeply, I'm sorry for everything. And then she left, leaving me alone with cold coffee and turbulent thoughts. 2 weeks after that unexpected encounter, Marcus showed up at my door. He hadn't warned me. He simply rang the doorbell on a rainy Saturday afternoon. When I opened the door and saw him standing there, soaked through, his eyes red from crying, my heart nearly broke. She left me, were his first words, his voice broken. Vivian left me. I know, I replied softly. She told me she would do it. He looked surprised. Did you talk to her? Soon? She apologized, explained a few things. Marcus ran his hand through his wet hair, a nervous gesture I remember him doing since he was a child. Mom, I messed up everything. Absolutely everything. My marriage, our relationship, my entire life. And I don't know how to fix it. I stood there, holding the door, torn between the maternal instinct to comfort him and the need to maintain healthy boundaries. I can't fix this for you, Marcus. I know. I'm not asking you to. I need you to know that I understand. I understand everything now. How I was manipulated. How I let them distort my perception of you. How I allowed something so horrible to happen. There are no words that adequately express how much I regret it. The rain was falling heavily now, drenching him completely as he stood in the portal. Come in, he said finally, stepping aside. You'll catch pneumonia out there. He entered hesitantly, dripping water onto the doormat. I grabbed a towel and tossed it to him. Dry yourself. We sat in the living room, a heavy silence hanging between us. I looked at my son, really looked at him, for the first time in months. He was thinner, with dark circles under his eyes, looking as if he were carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. What do you want from me? I asked directly. Nothing, he replied immediately. Absolutely nothing. I don't deserve anything. I wanted to say it in person, looking you in the eyes. I'm sorry for hurting you. I'm sorry for failing you as a son. I'm sorry for destroying our relationship. Silent tears were streaming down his face now. She could see the sincerity in his pain, the genuine agony of recognition of what he had done. Marcus, I began, choosing my words carefully, what you did was unforgivable. In many ways, it still is, but you are my son, and a part of me will always love you, even when everything else is broken. He sobbed, hiding his face in his hands. I don't deserve your love. Probably not. But a mother's love doesn't work based on merit. It works despite everything. I got up and sat next to him on the couch. I hesitated for a moment, then placed my hand on his shoulder. He immediately turned and hugged me, crying desperately against my shoulder like he hadn't done since he was a child. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, he repeated like a broken mantra. I let him cry, stroking his hair mechanically as I processed the whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The anger was still there, pulsing and real, but also compassion, also sadness for the entire situation. Also, a stubborn maternal love that refused to die completely despite everything. When he finally calmed down, I gently pulled back. I need to make something very clear, he said firmly. This doesn't mean all is forgiven or forgotten. It doesn't mean we'll go back to the way things were, because we can't. So much has been broken, but perhaps, with time and genuine work, we can build something new. Something different, but still valid. He nodded vigorously. I'll do anything, therapy, counseling, whatever you need from me. First, you need to do it for yourself. Fix yourself before trying to fix our relationships. Discover who you are without Vivian's manipulative influence. Genuinely grow. I'll do it, I promise. We parted that afternoon with a tacit understanding. There was a long road ahead. It wouldn't be easy, quick, or guaranteed. But for the first time since that terrible day, there was possibility. Months turned into a year. Marcus kept his word. He began intensive therapy, genuinely worked on himself, and never pushed for a deeper connection than I was comfortable offering. We talked weekly on the phone, meeting casually for coffee occasionally, rebuilding slowly, one careful brick at a time. His divorce from Vivian was finalized. I heard from third parties that she moved to another state, starting a fresh start. I genuinely hoped she would find peace and healing, despite everything. As for the apartment, Robert Chen transformed it into a high-end rental property, exactly as he had planned. He would occasionally pass by Westwood Street and see the building, feeling a complex mix of emotions. This place represented so many things: initial generosity, subsequent betrayal, justice finally served. I didn't regret the sale, not for a millisecond. It was the decision that needed to be made, the boundary that needed to be established. It protected my dignity when it was brutally attacked. It reclaimed my power when it was violently stripped away. Today, sitting on my porch as the setting sun paints the sky in shades of orange and pink, I think about journeys, mine, Marcus's, Vivian's. We all follow winding paths, make terrible mistakes, carry deep scars. But there's something liberating about setting boundaries, refusing to be a passive victim, taking control when everything seems to be falling apart. It wasn't about revenge, though many might see it that way. It was about personal justice, about emotional survival, about telling the universe that I wouldn't accept being destroyed without responding. Marcus called me earlier today, inviting me to dinner. I accepted. There's still discomfort. There are still moments when I look at him and see his fists flying toward my face. But I also see genuine effort, real change, the possibility of redemption. Not complete, never complete, but significant. As the sun disappears completely below the horizon, I feel something rare, peace. It's not perfect, it's not absolute, but it's real. I survived the worst moment of my life and emerged stronger, clearer about my values and limits. The apartment is gone. The family I knew has transformed into something unrecognizably different. But I remain scarred, yes, changed certainly, but standing, breathing, living on my own terms, and that, in the end, is victory enough. Try again. Claude can make mistakes. Always check your answers.